What's going on, everybody? Aiden from Birds vs. Boys here, coming to you after the Eagles survive in Kansas City to beat the Chiefs and improve to 9-1. If you can see, and if you are watching our YouTube or Twitter, thank you very much. This is an entire page of notes that I took about 3.5 quarters in that I have been taking throughout the first 3 quarters of the game. It's all notes on how they lost the game, and there's a whole paragraph about how the end of the first half lost them the game and the sequence of events that transpired. And then I think I could just rip this shit out because it doesn't matter. And they won the game in the end. And they got so many clutch stops in the fourth quarter against the greatest quarterback in the world. And now I'm talking about the things that won them the game. What a flip. What an incredible win. What a gutsy win. It was ugly. It was sloppy. It didn't feel like great weather for it either. And it was just an amazing, amazing mental focus win. A lot of teams would get dismayed. They were under pressure, Jalen Hurts was under duress all night, and they were able to bounce back and win that game. Here, again, these are the notes on what went wrong, thrown out the window. Then I had to scrap it all and think about all the things that went right. I think this is where the Eagles won the game and where the Chiefs lost the game. 4th and 4 from the 40. You have the greatest quarterback in the world. You're up 17-14 at home. To punt right there is just an insane move. I could not believe that the Chiefs punted the ball to the Eagles. And in that sequence, it's a touchback. So it's only a net of about 20 yards on that punt. To not go for it right there on the edge of field goal range as it is with Patrick Mahomes, give the ball back to the Eagles. And that's the one time in this game where the Eagles actually took advantage of it. You know, off the turnovers, they really didn't take advantage too much. But in that moment, when the Chiefs didn't go for it, that is the sequence to set up the game-winning touchdown. They go the screen to DeAndre Swift for 20 yards. That play was effective all night. It was actually probably the only play that was effective all night. Jalen Hurts missed Devontae Smith open on that drive. He goes back to him over the middle to set you up at the 40 and then gets you down to the 1. They finally set up that deep shot that had been trying with A.J. Brown. They take it, and they take the deep shot with Devontae Smith to set up the game-winning touchdown. But I think it all goes back to that play. The Chiefs have all the momentum. You're up 17-14. It's 4th and 4 from your 40. What in the Big Ten West football are we doing to not go for it right there? Cowardice is never rewarded in professional sports. I think we'd have all been screaming if the Eagles were up 3, 4th and 4 from the 40, and punted the ball back to Patrick Mahomes and punted the ball back to a good team in general, to any team in general, to give them the ball back is crazy to me. And I think it won the Eagles the game because they actually executed in that moment. Also in the fourth quarter and the second half in general, what a phenomenal job by the defense. And the talk of the town is definitely going to be the Chiefs receivers. Valdez-Scantling, oh my goodness, was that bad? And Travis Kelce. If Travis Kelce played for the Eagles and went to Buenos Aires for his girlfriend's tour and then put in that performance, I genuinely think that WIP callers might incite a riot. Like, they might be able to incite a riot with the calls that they would be having on the airwaves come Tuesday morning. It would have been bad. It would have been really bad. And that's going to be the talk. But I'll tell you what, it's another situation where 2:49 left. Mahomes has the ball, 1 timeout, and has 90 yards to go. I have nightmares about that exact situation all the time. Like that, you never left alone with your thoughts and the dark thoughts creep in. It's not monsters or creatures or anything like that. It's Mahomes with the ball left and playing against your team, 90 yards to go for a touchdown. You have to get a stop. And they do again. And again, it's the pass rush who gets home in a clutch situation. 3rd and 10 after that drop. Josh Sweat, Hassan Reddick get to the quarterback, and it's not a sack this time, which we had seen 3 walk-off sacks earlier this year on 4th downs in similar situations. This time it's the intentional grounding, which is even worse for them, and it sets up the 4th and 25. But again, I just feel like we talked about it 2 weeks ago when they got the sack against Dak Prescott that sent them back to the 22-yard line when they were sitting there at the 6, and it looked like the Eagles were going to lose that game. They get pressure in the biggest moments, and they are closers. So Hassan Reddick's been the closer, and we talked about it. We said if the Phillies had been able to close like this, we'd be celebrating World Series right now. This little NLCS ring from last year wouldn't be fake. We'd have a real ring this time. And I just think that they rise to big moments, and the entire team rises to big moments. But I really just thought that they did a great job in the second half because things were happening in that game that we're not used to seeing with the Eagles, where they were getting run all over, they were losing the trenches. Pacheco, I feel like, was flexing every other play, right? He's ripping off, being able to bounce it to the outside where you think they have it stuffed, and then it turns into a 12-yard gain, which can't happen when you're playing a quarterback of this magnitude and you're allowing them to rush for over 100 yards. And I feel like they really tightened that up, started to put them in third and longers, and that's when the pressure get home. And on the last two drives, you saw that happen where it was like a 2-yard gain. And I saw the comment here as Jalen Carter disappeared. Not really. I think there was a few plays that he got in there, including that play. He tackles Pacheco, gain of 1, sets up a 3rd and 9. And then I believe it was either Nicholas Morrow or Zach Cunningham. Reddick is pursuing Mahomes. They get their hand on the ball when he tries to get it out to McKinnon. They get them off the field there, and then they get the pressure home again when they're set up in a 3rd and 10. And albeit, the 3rd and 10 wasn't exactly the defense is doing. It's because they dropped a surefire touchdown pass. But at the same time, like they know their formula. It's to get people into third and unsustainable situations so that they can bring their pass rush, and they don't really have to blitz to do it because they have good edge rushers. They have good people in the middle with Fletcher Cox and with Jalen Carter. And that's just always been their formula. Apparently Sam Howell is the only one who can figure this out, because he had constantly had the Commanders in 2nd and 2s, and nobody else can seem to figure this out. Mahomes to a point was able to do it, but I just think they know their formula, stuck to it, and they did a great job in the second half. The Chiefs have had problems all year. We talked about it on our show. It felt like it might be a shootout because of the star power, but these are not the same defense, not the same offenses that you saw last year in the Super Bowl. It just hasn't been the same. And that Tyreek Hill effect, if that's Tyreek Hill instead of Marquez Valdez-Scantling, I'm going over the notes of all the things we did wrong instead of all the things that we did right to start the show. And I just think just the defense in general, though, like the adjustments that they made, they were losing in the trenches in the first half. And I was shocked to see it. You don't see them get punched in the mouth too often on both sides of the ball. And not only that, I thought they looked confused. I thought the offensive line looked confused, and I thought the defensive line wasn't getting home. And when that happens, they start to panic a little bit. And, then it starts to become like these long drives and stuff like that. And the Chiefs did have long drives, but, it's opportunistic football and forcing turnovers, which they did not do in the Super Bowl. There was a lot of things that they did not do in the Super Bowl that they did in this game. Sean Desai, I love him. He'll be gone next year after this. I think performance like this, it's over. He will be a head coach somewhere next year. I think he's done a phenomenal job. I think he did a phenomenal job tonight. And Jonathan Gannon, rest in piss, go to hell. You cost us the Super Bowl, and it was really nice to see the defense execute and get some stops in the second half of this game, because they didn't get a single one in the second half of that Super Bowl. So it was really good to see that happen today, and just in clutch situations. Like the offense comes out, goes 3 and out on the first drive. It's already 17-7, and you're thinking to yourself, this could get ugly. Like, we're losing focus. But the defense turns around and they force a punt, and they forced multiple punts, and they played opportunistic football, 2 red zone turnovers. And it's just like Kevin Byard making an appearance, making an impact, and just another great move. And you bring in those guys who can force turnovers, and he's done a great job historically against the Chiefs and against Travis Kelce. He did so again tonight, and I know it wasn't Kelce they had the pick. It was on Justin Thomas, but he did a great job. And it just like was a full 11-man effort on defense, and they were opportunistic, made big plays when they needed to. And I know Troy Aikman was saying bend, don't break, but a lot of those times it didn't even feel like they were bending. Like they were forcing punts. They were getting off the field. There were a few times, and aside from the end of the first half, I thought they did a really good job. And it's really hard to do against Mahomes, but I thought he had to make a lot of plays with his legs. And it's just really tough to corral him. And they did as good of a job as you can do. Let's talk about the game as a whole. I know we're covering the fourth quarter because it's how the Eagles stole this, but there was a lot that went on. I touched on it before. I really thought that they were going to lose this game based on how the end of the half went. So end of the half, you have the punt return where you had Tony going backwards. He breaks multiple tackles. He gets them to the 40. Offsides on 3rd and 7. So that's up 3rd and 2, and they convert. And then Mahomes has a gain of 14 after Fletcher Cox and Jalen Carter seem to have him for a sack. They score the touchdown at the end of the half. Not looking too hot for us. And at that time, I'm just thinking, like, we put so much analysis into this, into the schematics, into the pressure, into the play design, into what pop stars are attending the game. Sometimes it comes down to making a play, and they didn't do that. But they did at the end of the game to force an intentional grounding and set up 4th and 25. They did it then, and they did a great job. So I really thought in that moment, like the way that last 2 minutes of the half went, I really thought that they were going to lose the game. And against a team as good as the Chiefs and as good as a coach of Andy Reid and as good as a quarterback as Patrick Mahomes, I know it's just like a 2-minute stretch, but I feel like that is what could do you in, especially at the end of the half like that. I thought they did a really, really poor job, and I thought it was going to cost them a game for a large stretch there. And after that, so they get the ball back and they possess the ball for about 10 seconds. They had a 3 and out, and they could have been worse because Hurts got stripped. He was lucky to get that ball back. It's just brutal. Here is another thing. The QB draw might kill me. It might kill me because everyone sees it coming. I'm rewatching Stranger Things right now, and then in the first 2 seasons or so, every time those kids run into the trouble, they're like, 11, bail us out again. She's drained. She's passed out half the time. There's blood coming out of her nose. And every time something goes wrong, they're like, 11, use your powers and bail all of us out. That feels like what they're doing with Jalen Hurts on these QB draws. It's always like a 3rd and 8. And we're like, well, all right, Jalen, use your legs. Bail us out of this situation that we've created for ourselves. That's a mess. And it's not working. On the touchdown, it actually made sense. And I love the creativity on that drive. So they had Gainwell in the backfield, and this had set up earlier in the game. They ran it. Swift goes in motion. They handed it off to Gainwell. They come back later in the game on that touchdown drive in the second half. Instead of handing it to Gainwell, they give it to Swift in motion. He gets the 35-yard gain. Later on that drive, they had Devontae Smith in the backfield, little play action wrinkle, get him the ball out in the flat, gain of 5. That sets up the QB draw on 2nd and 5 for the touchdown. Creativity in the play calling, switching things up, giving different looks really worked. And that set up the QB draw instead of waiting until you're in 3rd and 8 and you're saying to yourself, I don't know what we're going to do in this situation. Jalen, bail us out again. And it doesn't work. That time it actually did work. The creativity in the play calling on those 2 touchdown drives in the second half were what really stuck out, because for a large part of that game, it was a lack of creativity, and not even a lack of creativity, just a whole lot of stupidity. The double wide receiver screen where they went to the left, and they're lucky that wasn't an interception. L'Jarius Sneed, who played a great game, forces the tackle there on Devontae Smith. He read that play before A.J. Brown ever had a chance to get out there and block. It was pretty remarkable how fast he read that. And you would think if they read it that quickly, probably don't go back to that right away. Or you could just flip it and go to the other side and run it with Julio Jones, which they did. And it's just like you had such a great opportunity after forcing that fumble on Travis Kelce, and you just squandered it. And it was just so frustrating because it's like, what are we doing in that situation where we're doing double wide receiver screens? And it was almost a disaster the first time you ran it. And you turn around and you do it again on the opposite side of the field. And there's a time later in the game where there was a deflection. They threw it to Olamide Zaccheaus. We talked about it on the show. You're not going to make up the lack of production from Dallas Goedert. Like there's no hole that you're going to fill with him out. Like it's not going to be Calcaterra. It's not going to be Jack Stoll. It's not going to be Julio Jones, right? It's not going to be any of those guys. You just give the ball more to A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. And to be running these wide receiver screens in the second half on the road in Arrowhead against the Chiefs and throwing it to Olamide Zaccheaus and Julio Jones after the wide receiver screen didn't work to one of your best playmakers in Devontae Smith is just a classic, what are we doing situation? Use common sense. And while we're on the subject of common sense, the Eagles had a 3rd and 1 and they were in shotgun. If only there was a play that statistically was so successful that the league was going to ban it because of how well it's worked, that you could have used in that situation. If I ever see the Eagles in shotgun on 3rd and 1 ever again, I'm putting a shotgun in my fucking mouth. Don't ever do that again. That's just dumb. Use common sense. And I feel like they got back to that with some of the drives later in the game. And even on that last drive, it was a disaster because of the hold. But really, I thought they did a good job where they had a little option play with Hurts using his legs. They got Kelce out in space to block. I think DeAndre Swift also became a blocker after having a running option on that play. So I really like that play call. It set up 2nd and 1. Then you do the tush push. You're in a 1st down from your own 44. And you're thinking, you're in a really good spot right there. Like, I love the creativity of using his legs, running the clock, and not just like this QB draw thing. Like, I thought that was an excellent play design on that. And you're thinking you're sitting pretty, and it was 2 good play calls in a row. Not so much. Then it became a disaster. Then they go backwards. We would have thought about that moment for a long, long time. To be up 21-17 on the road in Arrowhead, 4th quarter, there's 4.5 minutes left. You're at the 44-yard. You're at the Chiefs' 44-yard line. A field goal gives you a touchdown lead. and all of a sudden you go back 15 yards the other way with a holding call and with a tackle for loss on a DeAndre Swift run, it would have been a disaster. And we would have been thinking about that for a long, long time. So I'm very glad that the defense bailed them out time and time again. But even on that drive, I was like, all right, we're using some creativity now, and I think they finally got a hang of that. And in the first half, I thought the offensive line looked confused. Like a lot of people are going to put this on Brian Johnson, and there's just notable mistakes like that double wide receiver screen that we talked about that are going to like have people really frustrated with him. But I haven't seen this a lot, but I thought the offensive line looked confused. It looked like they were overwhelmed with the pressure, and it looked like they didn't know where the pressure was coming from. There were some corner blitzes where they got to Hurts, and it just didn't feel like they knew that they had three guys on the side. They had three blockers. Like they had it picked up, and they still didn't do it correctly. And they just looked off. It was like they needed to get in the half and adjust. And they did. I thought they did a good job adjusting in the second half, but they just looked off, and I hadn't seen that. And I think Brian Johnson's going to get a lot of the flack, and he probably deserves it. But at the same time, I just thought it was an offense that looked like they were a little bit overwhelmed by the pressure. But I think this is the overarching thing with the Eagles, and it's rare. It's really rare in sports to have a team like this, and it's a lot of it's Jalen Hurts. They don't waver. Like nothing really seems to phase them. It's always just a steady flat line. After that first half, it looked like a disaster. The pressure was getting home. They sacked Jalen Hurts 5 times. In the second quarter, he was sacked more than completions he had. That's almost hard to do. That is almost statistically impossible if you really think about it. 3 completions, 4 sacks. A lot of teams would have folded in that moment. A lot of teams, the system would have been overloaded. You ever been like too hot during a workout and you're like, all right, like I can't, my brain's not functioning anymore. The sweat that's dripping off my body is just making it so I can't think too much. But they recover so well. They are just such a mentally tough team. I don't think it was just BJ's fault. The play calling seemed bipolar, like Sirianni called some. It did feel bipolar. Like it just didn't feel like they had like an agenda. And I really don't know if that was them or if it was just because sometimes, what's that famous Mike Tyson quote? Everybody has a game plan until you get punched in the mouth. And I thought in the first half, the Chiefs really punched them in the mouth, especially just bringing constant pressure after Jalen Hurts. And it just seemed to overload the system of the offensive line. And they bounced back well in the second half with some good touchdown drives and with some good play calling there. But again, this is the Eagles. They're a mentally tough team. They are 9-1 for back-to-back seasons. They are the third coach and quarterback duo to do that since 1970. It is John Elway, Peyton Manning, and Jalen Hurts. Pretty good company to be in terms of those 9-1 starts. And at some point, we talked about this with the Dak stats. Like, yeah, he had great stats against the Eagles. It was awesome. Yeah, great win against the Panthers. At some point, it has to matter that Jalen Hurts is putting himself in these situations to win games and win them against the best competition. You're looking at this gauntlet of a schedule and saying to yourself, all right, well, they beat the Dolphins. They beat the Cowboys. They avenged their loss in the Super Bowl against the Chiefs. They're not just winning, they're winning big games. And at some point that has to matter. And it's just the whole team, I think from 1 to 53 is very mentally tough because 99 times out of 100, the away team in that situation folds. We're talking about the Bills already. We're on to the Bills. And they did such a great job of bouncing back, and nothing seems to totally overwhelm them. Not crowd noise, not blitzing, not pressure, not the greatest quarterback in the world. They seem to be able to handle it as a crew and as a team. And I don't know if that Sirianni is the coach. I think a lot of it is Jalen Hurts. And I think it's just the veterans that they have, whether it's Fletcher Cox, Jason Kelsey, Brandon Graham, like a lot of these guys have just seen everything in the game. They do such a great job of sticking in it and staying in the foxhole together. That is why they are 9-1 this year. Everyone will talk about how sloppy it is, and the weather was horrible. It was a sloppy game, windy. It wasn't a lot of fun to be out there, it looked like. But they stick together. They stick in the foxhole. It'll be ugly sometimes. People will complain because it's not blowouts like last year, but you're playing better competition, and you are still winning. That's why we love football, because when you watch other things on the TV, it's 30 minutes and it's scripted. Football's unscripted. That creates ugliness. That creates sloppiness. That is why not every game is going to be a blowout. Last year was an anomaly. That's not how it works in professional sports and doesn't work in the NFL with the amount of parity that we have in this league. Look around the league and the things that are happening on a week-to-week basis. Every week there's a game that shocks you. I would have never thought 2 weeks ago that the Houston Texans would have won to Cincinnati and won, and now CJ Stroud might be an MVP contender. I would have not thought that the 49ers would have had a 3-game win streak or a 3-game losing streak, but they did. It's the parity of the league. I would not think that the Ravens, who are now the 1 seed in the AFC, would have went to Pittsburgh and looked as bad as they did or lost at home to the Colts, but they did. It's the parity in the league, and the Eagles have been the model of consistency now, and they're at 9-1 again, which is fantastic. Just a few more notes about the game. I think the storyline with with AJ Brown will be annoying because he had another like sideline dust up. Again, I'll say the same thing I did as I said week 2. You can tell who played sports and who didn't. If people are nonchalant on the sideline and not animated and not talking to each other, that is the red flag. The red flag is not AJ Brown on the sideline when he's animated. He won his matchup. Throw the ball deep there. He's allowed to say that, and it doesn't have to be a storyline. Okay. Another storyline. The holding call or legal contact on Eli Ricks in the second half, was that the worst call for the Eagles that went against the Eagles against the Chiefs in the history of these two teams? Because I don't know, that was pretty bad. The roughing the passer, I would have loved to see if Jalen Hurts gets that call, because I have a pretty good basis and a good setting that he would have not got that roughing the passer call that Mahomes got late in the game. What are we doing, guys? Even the Darius Slay pass interference. Are we sure that's pass interference? Because it didn't feel like it. There was contact. It didn't feel like it really obstructed the offensive player at all. So, again, some of those calls, I'm like, what are we doing, guys? Listen, I'll give you the holding call in the Super Bowl. We're not doing this again. Those are some brutal, brutal calls. Again, the Eagles overcame it, and they always do, and they have done so far this year to go to 9-1. It's been fantastic, and it's been fun, and that's just one of those games where you're just jumping up and down in your living room. I can't believe that they won, and those wins don't come by too often. Again, like I said, 99 times out of 100, a team folds like that, and they didn't do so. They face the Buffalo Bills next week. When I saw the schedule and I saw the gauntlet, I was very confident in this game. They've had success against the Bills in the past. I think that they can do so again this week. The only thing I'd be worried about is like an emotional hangover. As someone who has a lot of experience in hangovers, I know a thing or two about it. When you're feeling pretty high one day and you're having a great time, that's when the hangover kicks in. Do we worry about that going against the Bills next week? This was an emotional win with the avenge of losing the Super Bowl, conquering your fears, conquering, the bully next door, Debo coming down the street and beating you up. You finally conquered him. You're at Craig and you finally fought back and you beat him up. Does this now kind of affect your focus going forward and a really tough stretch of the schedule? It's like in college football, if you've ever seen it, like the teams after they play Alabama and Georgia, the next week they always look in rough shape. It's because it's such a brutal battle when you play those teams that a lot of times they end up losing. Like if they lose to Alabama or Georgia, then they lose the next week too because they're so brutal or beat up. I wonder if it's the same here, like mentally and physically after playing like a really good Chiefs team. But since the schedule has come out, I was really confident in that Bills game. So I'm excited for it. And again, this is one of those wins where you're like, that was awesome. I could watch the Eagles again right now. Let's play another game. That's what I love about the Phillies. Like when they're good, I'm like, all right, we're playing again tomorrow night. I can watch the Eagles Tuesday night, like back in the COVID years. Let's play them on Tuesdays. I can't wait. But again, it was ugly. It was sloppy. The weather did not help. For the large part of the game, I was writing notes about how they lost this game, and they won. And that's on me for doubting them, honestly. 9-1. What an impressive win. What a mentally tough win. Just a mentally tough team and a mentally tough win. That's it for our show. I don't know how you sleep after this, by the way. I checked my heartbeat monitor at the gym at 6 o'clock, 155 beats per minute. In the fourth quarter, also 155 beats per minute. How do I just go to sleep now after that? After a huge win on the road against the Chiefs, against Patrick Mahomes? He had the ball with 2:49 and a timeout, and they didn't score, and they got the sack. Hassan Reddick, Josh Sweat. How do I just go to sleep right now? How does this work? What do I do? Just lay there and just watch the highlights of the Devontae Smith deep ball again over and over again? I guess so. I guess we'll have to do that. As a show, we will be back this week. The Cowboys play on Thanksgiving. We will be previewing that game. We'll probably talk a little bit about this game. We'll be talking about Eagles-Bills again. We got a lot to cover. What a week. 9-1, baby. What a freaking win. Never a doubt. Holy shit, this team is going to give me a heart attack. I can't wait, but what a win. We'll talk to you soon. Eagles win. Huge win. Biggest of the year.